One of the very first things you start feeling when you first have your spiritual awakening, or awakening of any sort for what it matters, is that you start feeling as if you want to be as true to yourself as possible. You feel this deep need to express yourself with sheer authenticity and let go, put away. You feel this deep calling to put away all of those facades you've been living through your entire life, to put away fake identities and false masks and false truths that you've been putting on for show, to cope, to survive, to feel safe. And you find yourself averted by living through lies, by the lies, and you become very sensitive to all of these facades and lies and fake identities and false truths and insecurities, and you just want to express yourself as much as possible with authenticity. You feel that calling to let go and be vulnerable, let yourself be vulnerable. And that means that you have to put away your insecurities, and you even become very sensitive to insecurities and facades and false identities, that you perhaps even start losing friends over that concept. You start feeling it, you start realizing it in everyone around you, and you start feeling this real boundary that's being set between you and that person. You start feeling as if there's no real connection towards those people who are putting on facades, and between you as well, who has been putting on a facade, a false mask your entire life, to feel safe, to cope, to appear in a specific image. And that means that you have to be very comfortable and very safe with your insecurities. And you start gradually putting away for real, letting go of your insecurities, your vulnerabilities, your masks, your shadows, the hidden lies, the truths, the shadows you live through. Gradually but surely, until you reach vulnerability, until you're able to feel vulnerable without caring, until you're able to face your insecurities head on without shame. And at that point, there's no longer shame, there's no longer fear, greed, guilt, regret, hatred, despite. And at that point, you find true freedom. At that point, you bask in the lightness of freedom. You understand, you realize, and that's the whole point, you realize that you've been living your entire life ashamed of insecurities, hiding your vulnerabilities because you're afraid to just be. Because at some point in your past, at some point in your childhood, something led you to feel very unsafe expressing yourself with authenticity, and you had to put on those coping mechanisms, you had to put on those defense mechanisms in order for you to feel able to survive, in order for you to feel safe, in order for you to belong. And we all know the many things, the plethora of things that leads to such a position, to such a state of, living in shame, of insecurities and fear of expressing yourself with truth. A dysfunctional childhood, a dysfunctional upbringing, a dysfunctional society, peer pressure, the need to belong. And that was okay while it served its purpose, as we had no one to explain things or clarify things better for us, for you at that age. But at this point, when you have your awakening, you start feeling the need to let go of all of these things. And that's for a very specific reason, and that's for a very important, good reason. You might have heard, many teachers, many gurus, many enlightened people telling you to just be yourself, to fully express yourself without care, to just do yourself, and everything is going to work out in your favor. You're going to find your happiness, your bliss, your joy, your love, your abundance in just being yourself. And that has really confused me for a very long while. In complete honesty, this was one of the things that really confused me for a very long time. I did not understand how could, because which is it? Is it that you have to be disciplined and, focused, be committed, devoted to your daily practice, your spiritual practice, to your connection, or do you just be yourself? What if myself is horrible on many different scales? What if myself is just, being a total asshole, a complete, bastard, and hating on others, judging others, scaring others, living in fear, stressing? What if being myself is just addicted to many different sorts of pleasures and process addiction and chemical addiction and so on and so forth? So how am I going to how am I going to find freedom? How am I going to find the light? How am I going to bask in the lightness of divinity and ascend eventually through high vibes and high frequency emotions and high frequency living when I just be that kind of myself? And what I realized is that being yourself is not being yourself that's defined by your past, that's defined by your ego, that is your ego. You be that version of yourself that's unattached to and unaffected by the ego. And that is being your most authentic self, and that's the power being your most authentic self holds. That's being your higher self, being yourself without your needs, without the desires, without the facades, without the insecurities, without the coping mechanisms, without the defense mechanisms that's been put in place by your ego for survival purposes, and it served it well while it lasted. But now to ascend, to break through, there's always a limit. This is the whole point, this is the whole purpose of existence, is that you have to overcome something, a deep part of the physical, of the 3D, which is going to lead you towards ascension, towards your infinite potential, towards your grace, towards gratitude, towards glory. And your infinite potential isn't necessarily, achieving a specific amount of things or achieving a certain level of success or gaining so and so material things. I mean, not necessarily, but it's more so what holds your bliss, your joy, your love, your gratitude, your freedom, your light, your divinity. And that's what remains once you find authenticity. That's what remains once you learn to let go of your insecurities. Once you face your insecurities head on, and you're able to express them without shame, to live through them, to show them without feeling guilt or regret or bad, or feeling as if you are bad for doing this, or you should feel bad, you should feel guilt, then nothing remains but freedom and light and divinity. And that's being your most authentic self. And that's exactly just like, being yourself is not being yourself that's defined by the ego. It's not being your ego, living your ego to its fullest, but it's rather living yourself to its fullest, your true self. Just like, mental silence and calmness and peace. For example, in meditation is not so much about silencing your thoughts as much as it's witnessing your thoughts without the ego. And that's what happens, when you experience life altogether without the ego. That's living your most authentic self. That's really, truly being yourself. And that kind of person, that kind of self, is the one that does not judge. It's the one that witnesses your thoughts without saying, oh, that's good, that's bad, that's evil, that's something I want, that's something that I desire, that's something that I need, that's something very pleasurable, that's joy, that's sadness, that's hatred, that's love. That's freedom, that's boundaries and limits and limitations. Truly, in your non-dual higher state of being, there's no this sort of judgment, and that's why that's your true freedom. That's why this is one of the first things you feel when you first have your spiritual awakening, or awakening of any sort. Even I've felt this since I've had my intellectual awakening and not my spiritual awakening. My intellectual awakening was something completely different from my spiritual awakening, but it eventually, several years later, around 3-4 years later, it led me to my spiritual awakening. It led me to that pursuit of the truth, and in that truth I found spirituality. And so just like silencing your thoughts and witnessing them, just like meditation is witnessing your thoughts without judgment, without the ego, without the you and the me and the I and the this and the she and the he. This is going to really lead you to true mental silence, calmness, Zen state of being, to your pure conscious state of being. And that's the whole point, your higher state of being. You feel that deep calling to let go of the facade, to let go of the fake identities, of your insecurities, to be naked, to be the version of yourself that was before you came into this 3D reality, to remember who you truly are. And who you truly are is the energy that's manifesting this reality through its consciousness. And that's pure conscious energy, that's source, that's the understanding that you are an extension of source, of God, of your higher self, of the divine. And when you eventually let go of the facade, when you eventually unmask yourself, undress the ego, that's the point in which the ego understands that you are more than just this 3D. And it starts even aiding you in pursuing, in becoming your higher self, in aligning with your higher self. Where once it used to resist that version of yourself because it did not feel safe, it felt as if it's not part of its survival scheme, and it perhaps is something that's going to threaten your survival. Now it sees it for what it is, because you let go of your insecurities that defined you in your past. So you cannot be defined by your past when you want to be authentic. You cannot be insecure about your mishaps, about your failures, about some things that triggered you, about some things that embarrassed you, that humiliated you, that scared you, that stressed you. You cannot feel unsafe about you cannot feel insecure about those things, going to where you're going to, taking the path to where you are going to, being on the path towards your higher state of being, being on the path towards your higher self, towards your infinite potential, which holds the version of you that basks in the lightness and the light and the freedom of lightness and the light of freedom and the lightness of the divinity. And then there's nothing more than just love, bliss, joy, peace, gratitude, grace. You gracefully and in absolute gratitude bask in the lightness of freedom. And that's true freedom, when you're able to express yourself without any care, when you're able to be very vulnerable, without caring, without any care in the world, without caring about this, about what that person is going to judge, what that person is going to think. How am I going to look? How does that stand in the society I'm living in today? Where do I measure up in the standards of this society? So just like that, it is undressing your ego, being yourself that's undefined by the ego, undefined by your past, undefined and non-identified by the things that hurt you, by the things that made you feel shame, made you feel sadness, made you feel despair, made you feel fear. And you face them head on because you don't care. You know, you're aware of who you truly are. You remember who you truly are. That you are pure conscious energy, that you are light. Then and there, you're going to be able to live your most purposeful life, your meaningful life, your most authentic life, your higher state of being, and there you will ascend. That's how you shift your reality. That's how you shift to new earth, to new dimension. Once you extend your awareness beyond this dimension of the room, of the apartment, of your house, of the street, of the country you live in, of the continents, of the world. That's how dimension works, and how you define yourself by specific traits that are aligned with each level of dimensions, with each dimension. And what awaits you is your true self. What awaits you is remembrance of who you truly are, and divinity, and pure conscious energy. And that's what you've been seeking your entire life. And what I hope for you, what I wish for you to find, because that's better than anything else that you could imagine. And so feel your shame, feel your insecurities, feel all of those, let go of all of your hidden masks and you know, fake masks and fake truth and false lies, false truths. Because if you don't, and you are on the spiritual path, you have that vision, then you are going to be one way or another led to letting go of these things through perhaps harsh lessons, through life lessons. And then you're going to be forced to feel all of those things, your insecurities, the things you're ashamed to feel or be or look like. You're going to be forced to feel them through experiments, through experiences. But when you feel them on your own accord, it's not as hurtful, it's not as painful. And you enjoy the journey more, you enjoy the ride more. But one way or another, you're going to end up as your higher state of being, as your higher self. You're going to remember. Whether you do it this way or another way or a third way or the 100th, the 1000th way, you're going to feel love, you're going to find truth, you're going to feel light. You're going to bask in the divinity of freedom, in the lightness of divinity, in the light of the divine, one way or another. And with that being said, that's all I wanted to share for today. Thank you so much for tuning in to another video by AF's Conscious Frequency. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel, because it helps this video find its way to many more others who might actually need it.